Welcome everybody to our very first children's book challenge. We've done lots of challenges, but this is our very first focusing specifically on children's books. So we are super excited to be with you. And I would like to introduce the team to you since we have some everyone's in different places except for Carol's here at the Redemption Press office and bookstore here in Washington. Carol is on our ownership team and is also a Redemption Press author of more than Bible studies now, but her first book with us was a Bible study, and that experience was what kind of propelled her to come and work with us. And Shelley Brown is also here with us today, handling a lot of the back end things. Those of you who signed up and have gotten your workbooks and had issues with trying to get payment in or trying to make sure that you got your workbooks, Shelley has been making sure everything works together with all of the technology behind the scenes. And then Heather, who is from Las Vegas, and she is taking care of the chat. So when you comment in the chat, you will hear back from her. Also, forgot to say, Miss Shelley is also on the ownership team of Redemption Press as well. And so we have an amazing team serving you all this for the next 3 days, as well as our special speakers that you will meet as we go along.
And I'll introduce you, Athena.
All right.
Owner and founder of Redemption Press, 37 years now, I think, in the publishing industry, and the knower of all the things publishing. I actually told her today, you're not allowed to die because I don't know all the things yet. So she is an amazing woman to work with and to watch this company continue to grow. So we are excited to be here to do this children's book challenge and to encourage you as authors to maybe take that step and do something a little different, or maybe out of your comfort zone, or maybe it's been a dream of yours for a long time to write a children's book. We have some amazing opportunities. The teaching is going to be really good to get you that foundation. And then we have a bonus session afterwards that you can join that's really going to dig in and coach you through this process, as well as we have an amazing opportunity that we're going to be doing. We'll talk a little bit about it later in the bonus session that will get you the chance to be a published children's author very quickly in the next month.
Woo! So, yes. So I am going to start us off with reading one of our best-selling children's books, award-winning and best-selling children's books. And this is going to be Good One, God, which is by Stacy Light. And the first time I read this, I was just smitten by it because it's speaking of my language, only two little ones. So I'm going to just start right off. Kelsey jumped up and down. Granddad's here. Who's ready to catch a big fish today? I'm ready, Zach called. Me too, Kelsey said. It was Kelsey's first time fishing with Granddad and Zach out in the bay, and she couldn't wait. Buckle up, Granddad said. Granddad headed away from the dock. The put, put, put of the motor made Kelsey giggle. All around, cattails swayed in the breeze. A great blue heron squawked and ruffled her feathers at them. I think she's wishing us well on our fishing adventure, Granddad said. Good one, God. What do you mean, Granddad? Kelsey asked. Well, Granddad said, everything God has made is good, and today we're seeing some of his best work. Kelsey looked around. She wanted to say, "Good one, God," too, just like Granddad. The boat stopped. Granddad baited their hooks with juicy pieces of squid. "Here you go," he said. "Watch your bobber, and when it goes under, give it a good yank." "Look," Zach said. A family of diamondback terrapin turtles were lined up on the log, taking a morning nap. Zach reached out. "They feel bumpy. Those bumps are bony plates that cover the soft part of the turtle's body to keep it safe from harm," Granddad explained. That was something to praise God for. But before Kelsey could open her mouth, Zach said, "Good one, God." Kelsey slumped. Zach had beat her to it. The morning breeze wafted across the water as they waited for the fish to bite. Suddenly, Zach's bobber jerked and sank. "Give it a good tug and start reeling in your fish," Granddad said. Splash! The fish's large tail flapped and splattered Kelsey from head to toe. Granddad grabbed the net. "That's a triple tail, Zach," he said. "They change colors to match their surroundings." Wow. But before Kelsey could say a word, Zach said, "Good one, God." Kelsey closed her mouth. Another chance missed. Lunchtime, Granddad announced. He passed around peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and a bag of crisp green grapes. As they ate, Granddad told stories of his days as a boy fishing in the same boat with his grandfather. Granddad whistled some of his favorite Bible hymns while they cleaned up after lunch. Kelsey and Zach sang along, but Kelsey kept on the lookout for something special. Soon their shadows were stretching across the water. "Time to head back," Granddad said. Uh-oh, Kelsey thought. Would she find something to praise God for before they reached the shore? Granddad made sure their equipment was stowed safely. Vroom! He pulled a tiny cord on the motor. Cool water splashed their faces. Zach laughed. "Granddad, my lips taste like potato chips." Kelsey licked her lips too. Zach was right. "And I can smell the salt," she said. Granddad smiled and explained, "When the ocean water evaporates, it leaves salt in the air." This time, Kelsey was sure she would be first. She opened her mouth, but "Good one, God," Zach said. Kelsey hung her head. Would she ever get to praise God for one of his creations? "Look, kids, the great blue heron is still there," Granddad said. "She's looking after her little ones." "Just like you look after us, Granddad," Kelsey said. Then Kelsey bolted upright. All day she'd been looking for one of God's special creations, and he was right there the whole time. "Granddad," Kelsey said. "Yes, sweetie," Granddad said. "God made you the best granddad ever." As the boat glided to the dock, Kelsey snuggled into Granddad's hug and whispered, "Good one, God." The end. So think about this for a minute. As you just even begin this process of thinking about writing a children's book, if you've never done that before, or maybe you have, but I love how God loves to just show up and be present and be obvious in our situation so that we can
Say, "Good one, God."
Woo! There you go. I love that because my whole thing in everything I write is pointing God's faithfulness to those who are reading my books, but I write for adults, not for kids. So when I first read this, I'm like, yes, this is showing kids how to watch for God in everything and see his faithfulness at work. So
Yeah, and I love how Kelsey is always on the lookout because she really does want to praise God. And so often we miss things because we don't recognize that God is actually in everything. And so we just think things are happening by happenstance or because of our, just going about our regular everyday lives. But when we become aware, when I was in kids ministry, I used to say, look for God sightings every day. And so we would get together and we would look for those. We would talk about the God sightings of the week. And that's what we need to do in our writing. Everything that comes along, we can see as a gift from God. And then we can say, good one, God.
Yep. Amen.
That's so good. I love it. That was the word that kept coming to my mind, just the awareness and having our children. We need that as adults. We need that reminder, but to raise our children and our grandchildren and just being very aware of creation and that God is in everything. If we just look.
Yeah, so we are going to feature a children's book every day, actually, so that we can just get a glimpse of it. Because as Athena was reading, I recognized how Stacy used almost every single thing we are going to be talking about that makes a good children's book in her book, and it's done in a fantastic way. But first, we want to share with you some of the mistakes that some children's authors make.
Yeah, so every day we're going to be sharing with you some mistakes that children's authors make. So here is number one for today. We think that kids' book has to teach a lesson. Children's stories do often contain guidance for living, but they should emerge naturally from the story as a lesson to be learned, not only by the child, but also by the author. Philip Pullman wrote The Golden Compass, and he says this. He said, "Thou shalt not is soon forgotten, but once upon a time lasts forever." I love that. That is a powerful quote.
That is a powerful quote. And I think through stories that I remember as a child, or even stories that I would get for our kids or for when I was doing children's ministry. And a lot of those books had these like great moral lessons, and they taught it and they spoke about it in the lesson. But to be honest with you, I cannot remember any of those storylines really, but I can remember the storyline of, the Three Bears. That's what I was going to use. There's like so many examples going on in my head right now, but the Three Bears, and the Three Bears, without telling you the moral, actually teaches moral truths. First of all, it teaches you, make sure you lock your door when you leave, right? Because otherwise people will come in. But the second thing it teaches is, the idea that we always want more. We want the biggest, we want the best, right? Because that's what Goldilocks was trying to get. This was too small and this is too big, but this one is just right. And so you could teach that lesson within that story, but it doesn't ever overtly come out and say that. So I love what Philip Pullman says, "Thou shalt not is soon forgotten, but once upon a time lasts forever."
Yeah, that's so good. All right. So mistake number two that we often make is assume that children's books are easier to write than adult books. Yeah.
Not.
Clearly not. So good writing is difficult no matter what the reader's age, and children deserve the best. Many people assume that picture books would be the easiest kind of children's book to create. But in fact, the exact opposite is true. Picture books may actually be the hardest because they demand conciseness, simplicity, and a visual sense.
Yeah, so good. Those are things that we do have to remember. And hopefully as we do this training, we will help you navigate all those different elements so that you're able to really put the words together to write a good children's book that kids will remember. So we're going to... Did you have something to say?
I was just going to say, in this place, many of you that are going through this with us have either never written a children's book or never worked with a children's book editor to make sure your children's books had all the right elements. So it's like, we don't know what we don't know. We think, 400 words, easy peasy. It's easy to write a children's book, but it's not. And so I love that we're giving you those mistakes all the way through this challenge so that you don't make those mistakes when you do take your idea of a children's book story and put it into something that could touch kids around the globe even.
And I've read a lot of our manuscripts that come in for kids' books, and they all have such fun and creative ideas. But oftentimes I look at it and I think this really needs some work with an editor, because there's too many elements that are supposed to be true to a children's story that are being neglected. And so we're going to talk about a couple of those today. In fact, we're going to look at 3 elements today. And so if you have your PDF, you'll see the big number 1 next to the word create. And so one of the things you have to do when you are creating a children's book is you have to come up with your big idea. And your big idea needs to actually be something that is going to spur a child to want to read about. They're not going to read about necessarily what you want them to read about. And so you need to do a few things to come up with your big idea. Now, we happen to have a lot of grandkids, and so we get to observe kids all the time, but that is the number one thing you need to do is observe children. Perhaps it is your grandkids. Our youngest daughter has 4 little boys, 6 and under, and they are all, I'm going to talk about them a little bit during this challenge because they are the ones that I would write a children's book for. But I observe them and I see the things they love. And these 3 the 3 older boys, they love garbage trucks. Garbage trucks are their favorite thing. They cannot wait till the garbage man comes. Our older grandkids love medieval times. They dress up, they get swords and the shields and all the things. So those are things that I see children are interested in. The second thing that you can use for your ideas are your own childhood experiences. For me, I lived with my grandparents. That could resonate as a children's book with a child going to live with her grandparents. Or perhaps when I took piano lessons as a child, and that was a big thing to all the practicing and what I had to do. And sometimes I tried to get out of it. And so there's some conflict, and there's, the end story could be a recital. So our childhood experiences. When I was young, my grandparents would take me on vacations in an RV. So a trip in an RV and traveling. Then you also have research. Do your research. Use the internet, walk through the toy section at your local Walmart and see what is it that kids are being drawn to. What are the popular toys? What are the popular games? Maybe the activities. Another idea you could have is to teach a lesson. It can be a cultural mandate. It could be something that's happening here in our culture. It could be something that is an issue that children face. Perhaps, like Jan Johnson, she wrote a book on grief for children with Michelle Medlock Adams. And so dealing with issues, dealing with behavior, dealing with character, those are things that you could teach within a children's book. Then you can also write about a noun, for lack of a better word, a person, a place. You could write about an animal or an event like a birthday or a holiday, an object, like a farm. Maybe you write about a doctor or jungle animals, the first day of school, different kinds of food. Any of those types of things could be centered in a children's book. And finally, you could write a children's book. Your big idea could be on an emotion or a theme. So for example, like your family or teamwork, maybe anger or bravery, bullying, death and grief, growing up, sadness, worry. Children face a lot of the same emotions that we as adults face, and they need to learn how to process it and how to understand what's happening within their mind and within their soul. And so being able to write about it in a fun way that guides them through those particular subjects would be beneficial and a great idea for a kid's book.
Love it. So you may have an idea already, but I'm going to encourage you to work on refining it. So here's how you would do that. Number 1, Google children's book and a phrase that describes your book idea. So once you have actually found books that are similar, look at the summary of those books. And once you've done that, number 3 would be to figure out how your book is different than the ones that are already out there and published. And it might seem common sense to check what's already out there before putting all your time and energy into a book, but so many authors do not do that. So this is just basic research that you can do in 2 minutes that will give you a sense of the competing books that are out there and whether it's worth you really investing your time and your treasure into this idea before you actually dive in whole hog.
Yeah. And today in our challenge, in our bonus session, we are really going to coach through this process of really discerning, like, what is your big idea and what can make it unique to the market that's out there, because the market is littered with thousands and millions of children's books. We want to make ours stand out and rise to the top.
And can I just break in here and say that's happening in the after class?
Yes. The bonus
So it's
session.
not too late. If you did not sign up for the bonus session, it's not too late to do that now. Just saying.
Yeah, Heather will put a link in the
Okay.
chat for you so you can do that. All right. So the second thing that we're going to address is the character. The best books have unique characters. Think of some of the books that you read when you were little. One of my favorites was Amelia Bedelia. And my favorite one was because she always got everything mixed up. And so there were a lot of interesting things about this character. But my favorite book from Amelia Bedelia was when she was left alone and they told her to dust the house, and she could not figure out why she would need to dust the house. And so she gathered a bunch of dust and she started spreading it out all over the house and made the house dusty. And that's not what her parents meant, but she took it so literally. And so Amelia Bedelia took everything literally. And I love that about her. So the character was unique. And we're going to talk about different things that make a character unique. Here's some of the things. They are quirky in some way. Perhaps they have a funny habit. Maybe they look strange. Maybe they look differently than everyone else.
Sorry.
But the main character is indistinguishable.
Down more.
Can you please stop touching things? She's touching my notes and I can't see what is going on. Oh my goodness. Okay. Pause for the love. Okay. And then she has a PC on top of it, and I have no idea how to work a PC. This is what I need.
There you go.
Okay, I need to do this. Did you want to see the chat?
I was trying to turn off my notifications on Teams so it doesn't bother us.
This is the real life with Athena.
All right.
There we go.
It's
Okay.
done.
Now, how can I make this bigger? Let's see. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Okay.
All right.
All
There you
right.
are.
We're back on our character.
Ready, set,
Goodness
go.
gracious. Okay. But you don't want your character to be ordinary. You don't want them to have something that the child reading it cannot relate to, because the character doesn't have characteristics that are unique to themselves, because every child is unique. And so you want a child that feels real. Every child has unique characteristics. And so when you create this character, you're going to want to do a character test to see how they measure up. You can think through, I have a list there for you of things you can think about as you develop your character. Number 1, are they quirky? What kind of habits do they have? How do they communicate? Perhaps they say a phrase over and over again. A phrase that I say all the time is "for the love," just like now, "for the love," Athena. And so that's something that I say often. And so think of a character or a phrase that they could say. Perhaps they have a sidekick. Maybe they have a puppy, or maybe there's a little turtle that's always with them, or a teddy bear. Whatever that is, draw that into your story. How do they handle their emotions? What are their favorite things? And do they have any secrets? What about their family? And how do they interact? And what is their role within their family, or even their friendships that they have? What about the interrelational friendships that they have, where they are able to really start learning and processing life together as peers their own age? And where do they live? So here's a few things that I have observed about our 3 grand kiddos. That the youngest is only like 4 months old, so he is still working on his personality, although he does have quite one. But Nathan is 6, and he is pensive. He does not trust easily. He's so quiet when he's around other people, not at home, but around other people. He gets embarrassed very easily, but he's an amazing athlete. He's also very cautious and meticulous as he's doing his kindergarten work. Now, his brother, the one in the middle, Lucas, he's 4. He's super emotional. Like, he will cry over anything. When you are FaceTiming them, he is always crying, it seems. He loves to snuggle in. He loves reading books. He loves having his picture taken and always makes faces. And he is super smart. And then Jackson, he's 3. He has a huge personality. He's not afraid of anything. He loves to surprise you with his words, and he is super playful and energetic. And so observing those 3 children and seeing everything that makes them unique could help me in developing a character for my children's book.
So good. All right. So once you've determined what your big idea is and the characters that you'll have in your book, you need to determine the genre that you will write. So there's not just one children's picture books. There's a way more than that. Our children's editor, Jenny DeLima, sat down with us the other day and gave us some instruction and what she's discovered in her work as a children's book editor and coach for oftentimes first-time children's book authors. And let's take a listen to what she had to say.
So our first topic today that is going to inform everything that you put in your picture book is knowing your audience, but also knowing your age group, which is part of your audience, because that's going to inform every theme that you write about, how you write about that theme. And you also need to figure out, what do they care about? Because that's going to change as children age. As an example, you might see that younger children are focused more on the family. And that's because a lot of their daily environment takes place within their family and their household. Whereas children who are older, such as 5 to 6, is when we see them transitioning into caring more about their friends. So then a friend-focused group might make more sense, or a book looking at friends and friendships. And this is something that you'll want to take into consideration, because if you write a story for an audience and your theme is either too young or too old for them to resonate with, it's not going to be a picture book that has lasting appeal, or they might not even understand why they're reading this picture book and exactly what is happening here. Another reason you really want to look into who your audience is, and again, the age group, is because we need to know if it's developmentally appropriate. Throughout our time as children, and anyone who's ever taught a class can tell you this from seeing a child at the beginning of, let's say, kindergarten versus the end of kindergarten, they learn a lot. They are changing at a rapid pace. And this is going to be true for cognitive development, their social emotional development, gross and fine motor development. Every single part of who they are is shifting and changing as they continue to learn. So that's another reason why we need to look at this, because if we have a concept that is asking a child to use an abstract thought, for instance, that's going to be fine for children who are 7, 8, or older. But for children younger than that, we might completely lose them simply because they haven't yet developed that ability. So this is something I've seen come up in a few picture books where a concept is presented, but it might not be developmentally appropriate for that intended audience. And it's quite easy to go online and even just look up, do children age blank understand blank? And that can just be a simple way of confirming whether or not you're on the right track without having to take that deep dive into research and methodology. We also need to know this because of our vocabulary choices. So yes, you can use words that are sometimes above what we would expect a certain child of an age group to know, But you don't want to use this too frequently because you're going to bog down the story and it's going to feel like they have to keep looking up words or asking for definitions to be applied for them that they're not going to be able to do on their own. And we can also, and this is something we'll touch on later, because we can use context clues to help with some of these words. But again, we don't want that to be used so frequently that the picture book now feels like a lesson and not like a form of entertainment. When we're looking at the audience too, one thing that you see come up quite a bit in helping to find an audience is to think of your ideal reader. And you can go as crazy and wild as you want to with this, where you're picturing that single child. Who do you most envision picking this picture book up and enjoying it? Is it going to be a child who enjoys playing tennis? Is it a child who loves to be in nature? Is it a child who lives in a city? Or maybe it's a child who lives in a small town on a farm. You can make this as individual as you like. And you can also look to your own story to see what in there is happening and who that is likely to appeal to. As an example, if you have an animal as a main character, animals tend to be more universal. And that's simply because we can take some of our own traits and characteristics and we can apply them to that animal. Whereas if we have a girl as a main character or a boy as a main character, children do tend to enjoy reading about children who are the same gender as them. And as an example, if we look at some very popular picture book series, we can look at Llama Llama, where just like it sounds like the main character is a llama. That has a wider audience than Fancy Nancy, where the main character is a girl and the audience who connects with that story tends to mostly be made up of other little girls. And when you're looking at this, besides just your plot and how you cover it and your vocab choices, this will also help you develop a main character who's going to appeal to that audience. Again, we talked about gender a little bit and animals, but the age of the main character matters too. So when we have younger children, they really tend to enjoy books that are written about characters who are the same age as them, characters that they can put within their own lives. They can envision this person being someone they know in the classroom. This is a friend, or they can put themselves in the character spot, so we can switch it around a little bit. But as children get older, and this is especially seen in middle grade, so around age 8 to 9 to 10, they tend to enjoy books where the characters are slightly older. So you can see there's a shift there. And then we see it retreat back to where it had been originally once people enter the YA period. So once you're a young adult, and we talk about like 13 to 18 within that age range, they go back to wanting characters who are about the same age as them. Granted, some of them will be a little bit older, just based off the maturity level of the child reading it and their reading ability, but they tend to see themselves as belonging to this same group. They're not likely to want to read a book about someone who is younger than them. So as an example, you probably wouldn't want to write a YA book starring an 8-year-old. And for the same reason, you wouldn't want to write a picture book aimed at, we don't want to say older children, which sounds a little silly because an 8-year-old really isn't old, but they're not likely to want to read a book starring a 5-year-old. So sometimes we can get around this by just giving a vague description of a child, not necessarily saying their age, not necessarily saying what grade they're in. And we're letting them fill in the blanks as long as that is something that's possible.
All right. Well, I love that there's so much more to it. I think a lot of times we go into, I'm going to write a children's book because it's like easy.
Yes.
It's like only a few words and it's not. And there just really is a lot of consideration to have and real strategic thinking as you develop it. And I love how you just showed the areas of, just very foundational.
So with the characterizations that you were talking about, the difference between having a person or a child being your character and an animal. So if you use an animal as a character, what does dialogue look like in that particular kind of children's book?
It can still look just like it would for a child because children in general tend to like characters who are other children or childlike. And the animal is now feeling that childlike spot. And just as another example of this, I go to career day at a local school here every year. And I always do these informal polls with the different children that come in because it's kindergarten through 8th grade. And I ask them every year, every class, what sort of character do you most like to see as the main character in the books that you read? And I give them the option of another child, an animal, an adult, or something else. And usually I'll get, that one something else like a robot, but it'll be like one kid in an entire class. 90% of them say an animal. And I think that's because animals have greater agency than children do. So they're able to go on bigger adventures. They're able to do more things because they have this adult style capability, and that they're able to adventure and be free to go about their lives, but they still have that innocence to them that makes them relatable to a child.
That's so good. I remember as a kid, my favorite book when I was probably about 4 or 5 was called The Pony Who Couldn't Say Nay. And there wasn't I think there was a farmer in it, but it was like this obligatory kind of person in the background.
Right.
And it was all animals talking to each other. And I memorized it, like everything about that book. I probably could still, on a farm, on a barnyard, just over the way lived a pony named Alfred who couldn't say nay. Okay. I've not read that book in probably, 40 years, but yet I still know it because the animals were so just engaging. Now, if you have both an animal and a child that are kind of sharing that spotlight, because we see that quite a bit. How does dialogue work with an animal character and a person?
That can depend greatly. There's really no one size fits all answer for that. And that's going to be, if we look at like the Calvin and Hobbes style a little bit there, where Calvin and Hobbes obviously have ongoing dialogue and ongoing banter with each other. How is this animal being seen within the picture book, within this universe? Is it going to be a typical animal where it can't talk back, or we're only reading the body language? Or is it going to be given equal status and it is capable of speech? So again, that can vary widely as well.
Good. Do you have another question? Because I do.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So we talked a little bit about the developmental state of a child and how to make the books appropriate for them. So what I thought as something that people who are new to children's books need to do is they actually have to go and observe children.
Oh, yes. Yes, exactly. And it's so just go to your local library even during the afternoon or picture book reading time, because they have so many options available, or even look up other books that you think fit your target market and see if you're really hitting the mark. Maybe you notice that your dialogue goes on and on a lot longer than theirs does, or maybe that your word choices are too lofty, or maybe your character is a little too self-aware given their age, because again, that self-awareness also is something that develops over time. We don't just have it. And that can read as off or not really fitting when a child reads that book, or even the adult is reading the book, because adults are the ones who are going to be selecting whether or not we read this book over and over again. They don't want to accidentally lose it. And so if they feel like there's something there that just really does not align with their own version of the world and what they want to have exposed to their child, that book might end up in I don't want to say the slush pile, because that's, a publication term, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. It might end up in the donation pile because parents are going to be reading this in a way where they want to be entertained as well. And one thing I think as a parent, not even necessarily an editor, but it's enjoyable to see children depicted in a way that feels true to real life. You enjoy being able to say, oh yes, my child has done that too. I can understand where this character is coming from.
Yeah, really good. Really good. I think you could observe children at your church and volunteer to work in the nursery or in the preschool and just kind of get a handle on how children behave and interact with each other.
You're doing good and you're doing research all at the same time.
I know. See? Nice.
Win.
All right.
Gosh. All right. So Jenny, thank you so much for being with us. And that is a great first day of this 3-day challenge and great foundation for us. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Whoa.
It's really bright here.
She's got the sun spotlight on her. There we go. All right. That was so good. In fact, let's just share what Jan Johnson had to say.
Oh, sorry, Shelley. Jan Johnson.
Yeah.
I'll bring it over. There we go.
It took more time to write my 32-page children's book than my adult book with 179 pages. So there we go. Case in point. So good.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So what we want to really talk through now that we heard that information from Jenia and got some kind of foundation things to be looking at as we write, we're going to ask ourselves the question that is probably the most common question that someone who is writing a children's book should ask, but it's also the one that they commonly get wrong. And that is, what is the right word count for your children's book? So ultimately, you need to figure out what range you are writing for and then write within that word count. And knowing your audience informs all kinds of things in your book, the illustrator you choose, how many words you will have in your book, and the language you use. So if you are one of those authors who think, I am writing a book for all the children,
No.
even though it's a nice sentiment, there is a rule that stands. If you're writing a book for all children, you're not writing a book for any children. Like Jenia said, a 10-year-old is not going to be interested in a book that is for 4-year-olds and vice versa. And so each group has different interests and needs, and your book needs to accommodate one age group. So let's go through the different ages in the books that are appropriate for the age. Now, you are going to see some overlap in the ages. And that's because, as you probably know, that children mature at different levels in their ability to read. But emotionally and psychologically, the development of the child is still very similar to the age group they are, no matter what their reading level is. So you may have a 6-year-old who is reading chapter books, but they still watch Paw Patrol and play with dolls. And so that's why there is an overlap in ages, but the content needs to be written appropriately for that developmental age. So we're going to start with board books, and we're going to give you some examples.
All right. So this is 0 to 3 years old. Children age 3 or younger typically read board books, and they are those tough little things that you give to the smallest of readers. So they're thick cardboard, and often they are 10 pages or less. They're made from they're printed on thick cardstock or cardboard, usually about the same weight of a hardcover book. But each page is that thick. They are quick and easy to read, and they're made up of mostly pictures and very few words. Sometimes board books will not tell a story, but rather follow a theme. And the main goal of these books is to teach young children basic language skills, like memorizing their ABCs or identifying shapes and colors, that kind of thing. So board books are meant to be read to children who are early emerging readers. And that means they're listening to the story, but board books are also meant to be chewed on, slept with, and treated as a toy. That's why it's got that super, super thick pages that is being used, because it's got to be able to survive all of that plus some. So we're going to give you an example that I'm going to move over here a little so that it's not so hard for me to see. Okay. So our example, Goodnight Moon. In a great green room tucked away in bed is a little bunny. Good night, room. Good night, moon. And to all the familiar things in the softly lit room, to the picture of the 3 little bears sitting on chairs, to the clocks and his socks, to the mittens and the kittens, to everything one by one, the little bunny says good night.
I love the book Goodnight Moon because it helps children be able to tell the story before they can even read, because of the rhyming words of, if the parent reads to the word kitten, the child knows by the context clues of a pair of mittens in the picture, as well as the rhyming word, that they can begin to participate in the reading of the book. And so that is a good example of a board book that helps children really engage in the story.
Mm.
Now, as we give these examples, and so basically we're reading the back cover copy that you would see, you're going to see this progression of plot. So Goodnight Moon doesn't really have a big plot to it. It's just simply a child laying in their bed saying goodnight to the things in their room. And so you have this very simplistic idea, but as we go, the ideas are going to become more and more complex. So the next group of books that you could particularly write, the next genre, is for ages 4 through 8, and it's picture books. And some of these books could be suitable for up to children of age 10, but young readers will most likely have a parent read, where if the child is closer to age 10, they would read the book on their own. Similar to the board books, these picture books, by name, of course, have a lot of illustrations and few words on a page, like the book we read by Stacy at the beginning of this training. In terms of word count, you want to aim for about 800 words. The sweet spot is actually 850 words to a maximum of about 1,000 words. Picture books talk about universal themes. Oops, I forgot to change the screen. Sorry about that. And offer intriguing and kid-relatable situations while challenging the readers or the listener's imagination. Themes are approachable, and there's usually one main character, one plot, and one storyline. This is one of the progressions you're going to see happening in children's books or as we go through. Picture books sometimes use rhythm and a cadence to engage young readers to listen and to employ repetition. And there is a greater rule of thumb to follow: one theme, one plot, one main character or idea, and end with the answer. So one of my favorite kids' books that I read all the time when I was a teacher was Where the Wild Things Are. And it's a little bit more complex of a storyline than Goodnight Moon, but it still has some very simplistic elements. This iconic story has an inspired movie and an opera and an imagination of generations. When Max dresses in the wolf suit and causes havoc in the house, his mother sends him to bed. From there, Max sets sail to an island inhabited by the wild things, who name him king and share a wild rumpus with him. But then far, far across the world, Max smells good things to eat. And the story continues. I love this book because it's, the child is sent to bed and he has this dream, or his imagination just goes wild. And kids, especially ages 5 through 8, they live in that imaginary world where they have imaginary friends and they just everything is believable to them. And so picture books really do launch into that. Now, the next section that Athena is going to talk about are kids about the same level, but these are kids that have a higher reading ability.
All right, so we're going to call these early readers. Children in this age range are just starting to read on their own. These books focus more on words and less on illustrations. They feature simple phrases and only go up to about 2,000 words. Early readers are books with slightly more text than found in your average picture book. They have 32 to 64 pages with simple, repetitive text. Usually every page or every other page has an illustration. These books are targeted toward new readers and often repeat a particular sight, word, or phrase for these early readers to memorize. They have a simple sentence structure, can be read aloud or silently, and often come in series form. So topics and themes are lighthearted, and books usually explore one idea, subject, or theme. Many times books are character-based. So the example we're going to use is Uncle Elephant. While his mother and father are away, a little elephant goes to visit his uncle. And what a time they have. Uncle Elephant makes wishes come true, tells amazing stories, and trumpets the dawn. The visit is perfect, except for one thing. It ends much too soon.
Sounds like a fun book. All right. The next is chapter books for ages 6 to 10-year-olds. Chapter books are for children who have learned how to read on their own and are looking for a more challenging read, but are not quite ready to dive into a full novel. So these books feature short chapters, a simple plot, and are typically between 8,500 and 1,200 words. In these books, you start to see subplots.
Wait a second. 850 to 1,200 words, or
8,500
to 12,000 words.
words.
Okay,
Sorry.
just want to make sure.
I'm not really good at the whole K thing. Okay. So,
All right, just want to make sure we don't confuse anybody.
yeah, up to 12,000 words. How's
There we
that?
go.
Okay. In these books, you start to see subplots and more complex storylines. So here is where you start introducing other characters and their roles. Before middle grades came along as a category, chapter books were the only bridge that they had to really bridge that gap between picture books and young adult books. So an example would have been Charlotte's Web, which Charlotte's Web is written for definitely a young reader, but it's not something that you could go directly from picture book to read because it is pretty complex and the length of it is much longer. Chapter books will have few to no illustrations. They are typically not longer than 100 pages, and they are most often based for elementary school aged children. Many chapter books are single character or subject based, but they also contain that simple subplot or perhaps even two. And so we're going to do, I guess I didn't do an example of that one, but there you go. All right.
Alrighty then. All right, we're going to jump to middle grade fiction, which covers 8 to 14 years old. These children have moved on to longer chapter books like the Percy Jackson books. Is that up now?
No, not yet.
Okay. It can be divided into 2 subcategories: books for middle grade school children and books for upper elementary school children. They contain longer chapters than found in chapter books, often no illustrations, and can have over 100 pages. The readership is hungry to read at this age, so series are definitely popular. So let's look at 2 subcategories in more detail. The first example is Absolutely Alfie. Second grader Alfie Jakes knows that when it comes to some friendships, one day you're in and the next day you're out. When Alfie's former best friend Lulu announces that she's hosting the best sleepover ever and that she's only allowed to invite 6 girls, Alfie desperately wants to go, but is not sure she'll be one of the lucky few. Lulu's classmates are doing all they can to win her favor, a task that often ends in tears. Can Alfie convince her used-to-be best friend that a party is better when everyone is invited, or will she get herself uninvited instead?
All right. So that is actually an example of that transitionary book type. And if we look at it, we recognize that it's going to start deal with issues that children that age deal with, friendship.
Right.
And we know if you've been around children at all that
they can be
friendships are
super
very
mean.
fickle. Yeah, one day you're your friend and so-and-so's not my friend anymore. And so this book dives into that topic. Now, the next are the 2 different categories that we have, the lower middle grades and the upper middle grades. So you want to take the lower middle grades?
Sure. All right. So the target ages are 7 to 10 years old. Lower middle grade is a really fun format to read and explore. The themes will be complex but approachable. No kissing, no gory details, if any. The stories will have a subplot or 2. Oftentimes, lower middle grade employs elements like humor or explores factual, science-based ideas or historical events. They are also great candidates for fantasy since the readership is in that imagination-driven place between childhood and teetering into the preteen years. The lower middle grade format is more like 25,000 words as an average, which is about 100 pages. All right, so the next example is Wish Tree. Trees can't tell jokes, but they can certainly tell stories. Red is an oak tree who is many rings old. Red is the neighborhood wish tree. People write their wishes on pieces of cloth and tie them to Red's branches. Along with a crow named Bongo and other animals who seek refuge in Red's hollows, this wish tree watches over the neighborhood. You might say Red has seen it all. Until a new family moves in, not everyone is welcoming, and Red's experience as a wish tree is more important than ever. Funny, deep, warm, and nuanced, this is Katherine Applegate at her very best, writing from the heart and from a completely unexpected point of view.
Yeah, using a tree as a character with the animals that surround them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do the upper middle grades, and that is ages 10 to 13. And this has a readership that are able to follow complex plot lines and storylines. And they also get into some relational issues, some teenage issues. There might even be a hint of romance, but no kissing, because they think that's gross still at that age. Complicated themes can be explored in an age-appropriate way, and typically the books are about 50,000 words. An example of this was The Ethan I Was Before. And this one is a story about, let's see, the Ethan I was before then had been many things. He was always ready for adventure and always willing to accept a dare, especially from his best friend, Casey. But that was before the accident that took Casey from him, before his family moved from Boston to a small town in Georgia. And so here is where Ethan turns into who he is afterwards. And it really helps the children explore how life changes by circumstances and just by the experiences that we have. Finally, there is young adult, and these are books that probably most of you in this room are not thinking of writing, but the word count is about 90 to 70,000 and very complex issues that an adult would actually want to read. And so many of you are probably, I never read them. Did you ever read The Hunger Games?
Nope.
Never read it, but it was a series of books that really went from one place, spanned a huge age group from adults to teenagers. So these books are a much more complex storyline and deal with a lot of issues that we're facing in the world today. So this is where we are going to, and I'm going to go ahead and Shelly, you can take that screen out for us. We're going to discern now. And this is your homework for tonight. What would be the best option for you, for the big idea you have, for the character you want to create for in your storyline, and then decide what genre it would fit best in. You can complete that exercise at the bottom of the PDF so you're ready for the next step tomorrow. But if you are in the bonus Zoom, we are going to be working through this together, and we're really going to be coaching you on how to make this unique and a great place for you to start as you write your book. This book that we're going to also do, so we have some special things. We're going to go through the coaching, and that's going to be amazing as you really start working through and brainstorming through your ideas. But we are going to actually put a children's book together as a group, and it's going to be a epiphany. Epiphany? Is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
Epiphany. It's gonna lead up to Epiphany, when the wise men come to see Jesus. But it's going to be done in a rhyming way, and rhyme is so challenging to write. And so this Zoom session is really going to help you make sure that meter is correct and all of the things that you will need to know how to write in a good rhyming way. Now, if you're part of Redemption Press University, you actually get this bonus for free. So if you haven't got it yet, just send Heather a quick message or Shelly, and we'll make sure you get the link. It is in the Redemption Press University private Facebook group. But if you would like to be part of this bonus session and get some coaching and be a part of this collaborative book process that we're going to go through for this Christmas, go ahead and you can click the link that Heather's putting in the chat. So Shelly, welcome back.
Yes. All right. Well, we're running out of time. We need to hop into our VIP session, but just a couple of real quick announcements. So every morning you will receive an email from me with your worksheet PDF for that day's live session. If you're watching this and you do not have the PDF, you didn't receive an email, it's because it either went to junk mail or you have not registered. You have to register in order to get, it's still free, but you have to register in order to get the PDF worksheets. All right. So let me see what else. VIP, as Carol and Athena just mentioned, you still have time. And I'm going to check my email right now as we hang up, because those alerts are going to start coming through, and I will get you the link. It's a private Zoom link that it has to come to you through email. We're not posting any of this in the Facebook groups. So I will send you the link to Zoom. You may be a few minutes late, but maybe they'll do some introductions and we'll get you in there in time so that you can be in there for the actual coaching session. All right. Oh, and all the replays, one more thing, all the replays will be available in the group. I'm going to organize them under guides, but it will be in the group through Sunday, the 19th. Okay. This coming Sunday. After that, they're going away. But if you get the VIP for $37, you will have a link we will send to you for unlimited access to all the replays. Okay. Whew, there you go.
Thank you, Miss Shelley. So
right.
We will see those of you who signed up for it in the Zoom session and the Redemption Press University members. We're going to start in 5 minutes from the time we log off this session. You'll have 5 minutes. And so get there quick and be ready to coach as you discover your big idea and how to choose the best genre for your book. And again, brilliant, this idea for the children Christmas book, because going through when the wise men show up, it usually ends with Jesus being born. This story is going to go through January, early January. So it's going to last longer than your normal Christmas book for children. So just got to say, you will want to be part of that. So see you on the other side.
See you in a few.
That's question really quick. So Jan, if you are an RPU, are you in the coaching? And that is a big yes. And the link for the Zoom is in the Facebook group for Redemption Press University. So go ahead and click that and you get to be automatically entered in that. So it's going to be super fun. Can't wait to see you all there. Yes. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow if you're not in the Zoom session today.